The wind howls between the rusted structures of the old Wonderland Park, where for 3 years no child has laughed on roller coasters or delighted in cotton candy. The chains of the flying chairs swing alone, producing a haunting metallic creak that echoes through the night. Empty cans roll across the cracked ground, pushed by icy gusts that carry the smell of mold and abandonment. But what terrorizes most isn't the morbid silence of the park. It's the cassette tapes strategically scattered among the broken rides. Each one contains the hoarse, calculating voice of someone who calls himself Jigsaw, explaining cruel rules for games where the only option is to win or disappear forever. Oh, visitors, I want to play a game ... Mystery Inc. has just accepted the most dangerous invitation of their lives to investigate the mysterious disappearance of 5 people at Wonderland Park. Fred drives the van down the potholed road while Velma examines newspaper clippings. Daphne adjusts the rearview mirror, uneasy with the feeling of being watched. In the back seat, Scooby-Doo trembles uncontrollably beside Shaggy, who devours a triple ham sandwich as if it were his last meal. What they don't know is that their own footprints are already being tracked by hidden cameras, and that soon, each member of the group will face a deadly challenge designed specifically for their greatest weaknesses. The Mystery Inc. van creaked as it parked in front of the rusted gates of Wonderland Park. It was a cloudy October afternoon, and the gray sky seemed to weigh on the abandoned structures like a damp blanket. Fred turned off the engine, and the silence that followed was almost deafening. Only the moaning of wind between the metal structures broke the sinister quiet. "Gang," said Fred, taking the keys from the ignition. "According to Sheriff Morrison, 5 people have disappeared here in the last 2 weeks. They were all curious visitors who came to explore the abandoned park." Velma adjusted her glasses and flipped through her notes. "The strange thing is that all the disappearances follow a pattern. People always leave their cars outside, and their footprints are found up to the main entrance. But then ... nothing." "What a scary place," murmured Daphne, looking through the window at the rusted roller coasters rising like metal skeletons against the sky. "It looks like something out of a horror movie." From the back seat, Shaggy swallowed hard on a piece of his ham and cheese sandwich. "Guys, are you sure we need to go in there? Maybe the people just ... I don't know. Decided to start a new life far from here? Oh no, don't want to go in," agreed Scooby-Doo, trembling so much that his ears shook frantically. Fred smiled confidently. "Come on, gang. We've solved hundreds of mysteries. This one won't be different." He opened the van door and jumped out, breathing deeply the cold, humid air. A strange smell hung in the air, a mixture of rusted metal, rotten wood, and something vaguely chemical that he couldn't identify. The 5 friends approached the park gates. A faded sign still hung from a chain: "Wonderland Park, where dreams come to life." But someone had crossed out the phrase with dark red paint and written underneath, "Where nightmares begin." "How welcoming," Daphne commented dryly, ducking under the chain that blocked the entrance. "Who do you think wrote that?" Velma took a magnifying glass from her pocket and examined the paint. "It looks like common spray paint, applied about a week ago. But look at this ... She pointed to small holes in the sign. "Someone installed micro cameras here." "Cameras?" Fred frowned. "So someone is watching us?" Suddenly, rusted speakers scattered throughout the park came to life with electronic static. A harsh, calculating voice echoed among the empty structures. "Hello, Mystery Inc. I was waiting for you." Shaggy jumped and grabbed Scooby. "This is not good. This is definitely not good." The voice continued. "My name is Jigsaw, and I want to play a game with you. You came here looking for answers about the disappearances. I will give you those answers if you survive my tests." Velma looked around, trying to locate the source of the sound. It's an old park sound system. The transmission is coming from somewhere inside the facilities. "Each of you has a weakness," the voice continued. now with an almost amused tone. The leader who trusts too much in his plans. The intellectual who believes she can solve everything with logic. The beauty who underestimates her own strength. And the cowards. The cowards who hide their true courage behind fear. "He's talking about us," whispered Daphne. "You have until sunset to find the 5 missing people and discover my identity. Fail, and you'll join them ... permanently." The sound faded into static, leaving only the wind howling between the structures. Fred swallowed hard, but maintained his confident posture. "Gang, we won't be intimidated by threats. Let's split up and explore the park. Velma and I will check the House of Mirrors and the carousel. Daphne, Scooby, and Shaggy, you take the games area and the main roller coaster." "What?" shouted Shaggy. "Why do we always split up in the most haunted places?" But before they could protest further, a distorted, sinister circus music began playing from the speakers, echoing through the empty corridors of the park like a macabre invitation to enter the nightmare that awaited them. Daphne, Scooby, and Shaggy walked cautiously through the abandoned games area, where colorful booths now looked like gaping mouths in the afternoon twilight. Moldy stuffed animals hanging as prizes swayed slightly, creating dancing shadows that made Scooby hide behind Shaggy's trembling legs. "Look," said Daphne, pointing to a shooting gallery where plastic bottles were still organized in perfect pyramids. "Someone has been here recently. These bottles should be knocked over after 3 years." Shaggy nervously approached an abandoned hot dog stand, where the sour smell of rancid grease still lingered in the air. "You know, Daph, I always thought the worst that could happen at one of these stands would be food poisoning ... Suddenly, a small recorder fell from the booth ceiling, landing at Daphne's feet with a dull thud. She picked it up carefully, and automatically the device began to play. "Hello, Daphne Blake. You've always been underestimated by the group, haven't you? The rich girl who only serves to be captured. But I know there's more to you than meets the eye. Let's test that." Daphne's eyes narrowed. "How does he know my full name?" The voice continued. "In the House of Mirrors, you'll find a special maze. Inside it are 2 of the missing people. But beware, the mirrors don't just reflect your image. They reflect your deepest fears. And oh, how fun it is to watch brave people discover they're not as courageous as they thought. ... The recorder clicked and fell silent. "Rouse of mirrors?" moaned Scooby. "Irate mirrors." "Relax, Scooby," said Daphne, putting the recorder in her purse. "Let's find Fred and Velma first." Meanwhile, on the other side of the park, Fred and Velma explored the surroundings of the House of Mirrors, an octagonal structure with an Art Deco facade that had once been Wonderland's pride. The windows were cracked but still reflected distorted fragments of their images. "Interesting," murmured Velma, examining footprints in the sand around the entrance. 5 pairs of footprints going in, but none coming out. And look at these marks on the ground ... Fred crouched beside her. They look like grooves, as if something heavy had been dragged. "Not something, Fred, someone." Velma followed the marks to a side entrance of the House of Mirrors that had been recently forced. The hinges still had fresh paint chips around the screw holes. "Whoever this Jigsaw is, he has full access to the park," observed Velma. "He knows every structure, every secret entrance." Fred found another recorder, this one taped to the main door frame. When he approached, the device activated automatically. Freddie Jones, the natural leader. Always confident, always with a plan. But what about when your plans fail? When your leadership isn't enough to save your friends? Fred clenched his fists. "Listen here, you coward. If you want to test us, show up and face us head on. Inside the House of Mirrors, I've created a special maze for you, Fred. It's full of mechanical traps, ropes, pulleys, springs, ... All the things you love to use in your plans. But this time, you're not the hunter, you're the prey. And your favorite traps might become your doom." Velma frowned, analyzing the situation. "Fred, this is obviously a trap. He wants us to go in there." "I know, Velma, but if there are people inside, ... "Oh, there are," the recorder's voice interrupted, as if it could hear the conversation. "Two young couples who came here last week looking for thrills. Now they're facing the most thrilling game of their lives. You have 1 hour to save them before the mirrors show more than simple reflections." The recorder made a static noise and stopped. At that moment, Daphne, Scooby, and Shaggy came running up. "Gand," shouted Daphne. "We also found a recorder. This jigsaw knows who we are, and ... And he's prepared a test for each of us," Velma completed grimly. "The question is, why? What does he gain from this?" Shaggy looked nervously at the House of Mirrors, where strange lights flickered faintly through the cracked windows. "Guys, I have a really bad feeling about this. And when I have bad feelings, they're usually right." "Exactly," agreed Scooby, trembling. Fred observed the darkening sky. "We have no choice. If there are people inside, we need to save them. But we'll go in together. We won't split up." As they approached the main entrance of the House of Mirrors, they could hear sounds coming from inside. Muffled screams, mechanical noises, and occasionally a sinister laugh that echoed between the mirrors as if coming from everywhere at once. It was then that they realized the main door had closed behind them with a frighteningly final metallic click. The interior of the House of Mirrors was even more disturbing than they had imagined. Hundreds of mirrors of different sizes and shapes created an infinite maze of reflections, where a person could see themselves multiplied infinitely or distorted into grotesque forms. Weak fluorescent lights flickered irregularly, casting dancing shadows that made the reflections come to life. "Stay close," whispered Fred, extending his arms to guide the group. "It's easy to get lost here." Velma examined the mirror structure with her magnifying glass. "These aren't ordinary mirrors. Look at these small projections on the edges. They're mini LED projectors. Someone modified this place to create specific optical illusions." "Relusions?" asked Scooby, seeing his own image reflected as a frightening giant in a convex mirror. Suddenly, Jigsaw's voice echoed through hidden speakers. "Welcome to my experimental psychology laboratory. Each mirror here has been programmed to show not just your reflections, but your deepest insecurities. Observe." The mirrors around them began showing disturbing images. Fred saw himself repeatedly failing to capture villains, with his friends being hurt because of his poorly planned schemes. Velma saw her theories being constantly proven wrong, with her being ridiculed for her intellectual arrogance. "These are just visual tricks," said Velma firmly, but her voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "Basic psychological projections." Daphne, however, seemed more affected. The mirrors showed versions of her constantly being captured, being a burden to the group, never contributing anything useful. I'm not really like that, am I?" "Of course not, Daphne," said Fred immediately. "You've saved us countless times." Shaggy and Scooby hugged each other, trying to avoid looking at the mirrors that showed them as pathetic cowards abandoning their friends in the most critical moments. "This is cruel," murmured Velma. "Whoever Jigsaw is, he's studied our psychology deeply." They advanced through the maze, following distant screams that seemed to come from somewhere in the center of the structure. The corridors narrowed and widened unpredictably, creating a sensation of claustrophobia followed by agoraphobia. "Wait," said Daphne suddenly, stopping in front of a particularly large mirror. "This one isn't showing illusions. It's a normal mirror, but look what's behind it." Through the glass, they could see a secret room where two people, a young couple, were tied to chairs, with headphones being forced to watch their own distorted images on dozens of monitors. "We found two of the missing people," exclaimed Fred. Velma examined the wall. "There's a secret entrance here. Look at these disguised hinges." When Fred tried to force the entrance, however, A series of ropes and mechanical traps were activated. Pulleys descended from the ceiling. Ropes stretched at chest height, and sharp pendulums began swinging through the corridors. "It's a trap within a trap," said Velma, impressed against her will. "He really knows how Fred thinks." "Gang," said Shaggy nervously. "I don't want to be the group pessimist, but look behind us." When they turned, they discovered that the path they had taken was now blocked by mirrors that had silently slid, creating a solid wall. "We're trapped," Daphne stated. Jigsaw's voice returned to echo. "Now we come to the fun part. Fred, your favorite traps are everywhere, but this time you can't just shout 'split up' and expect everything to work out. Every wrong move triggers more traps. Every wasted second makes the rescue more difficult. And if we can't get out of here?" asked Shaggy. "Oh, you'll get out. The question is, all of you, or just some?" Fred took a deep breath, analyzing the traps around him. "Velma, I need you to calculate the timing of the pendulums. Daphne, I see a lever on the ceiling. You're the only one agile enough to reach it. Shaggy, Scooby, you'll have to create a distraction." "A distraction for what?" asked Shaggy. "For the automated system that's controlling all this. If we can overload it with simultaneous stimuli, maybe we can confuse its sensors." Daphne looked up, where a red lever hung from a rope about 3 meters high. "I can try, but if I miss ... "You won't miss," said Fred with conviction. "I trust you." For the first time since entering the House of Mirrors, Daphne smiled with real confidence. "All right then, let's show this Jigsaw that he underestimated our team." But as they prepared to execute Fred's plan, the mirrors around them began showing even more disturbing images, scenes from other Jigsaw games, with participants who weren't successful. And from the back of the room, a new voice joined the screams of the trapped couple. Someone else had been captured. Fred carefully studied the traps around him, his mind working at maximum speed. Years of solving mysteries had taught him to think like a trap engineer, but this time he was on the wrong side of the equation. "All right, gang," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the tension. "Velma, did you notice that the pendulums follow a specific pattern?" Velma adjusted her glasses, mentally timing the movement of the swinging blades. "Yes, they complete a cycle every 12 seconds, but there's a 1.3-second window where 3 of them stop simultaneously. That's when we have our chance." "Perfect. Daphne, when I give the signal, you're going to jump to that beam there." Fred pointed to a wooden beam about 2 meters above. "Use it to propel yourself to the lever, pull it, and then come down the rope." Daphne examined the route, calculating angles and distances. "I can do that. But what about the ropes that will stretch when it's pulled?" "That's where the riskiest part of the plan comes in." Fred smiled nervously. "Shaggy and Scooby, you'll need to run through the central area exactly when Daphne pulls the lever. The movement will trigger the weight sensors, making the ropes concentrate on you two, freeing our path to the secret room." "Run through the deadly traps?" shouted Shaggy, almost fainting. "Fred, have you lost your mind?" "Calm down. It's safer than it seems," Fred explained quickly. "The ropes are triggered by pressure on the floor. If you run in a zigzag, following exactly the pattern I'm going to show you, you'll always be 1 step ahead of the traps." Scooby trembled so much that his teeth chattered audibly. "But what if we miss?" "You won't miss," said Velma with conviction. "Statistically, you two have superior reflexes when you're extremely scared. It's an adrenaline response." Daphne positioned herself for the jump. "How long has it been since we made a plan as crazy as this?" "Since always," admitted Fred. "But it's our only chance." On the count of 3.1, Jigsaw's voice interrupted. How touching. The leader trusting his team. But you don't know everything, do you? There are more sensors than you imagine. And if you fail, well, let's say the next visitors will find 5 new ornaments in the House of Mirrors. 2. Fred ignored the provocation. Velma shouted, "Window of opportunity and now." 3. Everything happened simultaneously. Daphne jumped with the grace of an Olympic gymnast, reached the beam perfectly, and propelled herself toward the red lever. At the same instant, Shaggy and Scooby shot through the center of the maze, running in zigzag like two human pinballs. "More to the left, Shaggy," shouted Fred. "Scooby, jump now." Daphne reached the lever and pulled it with all her strength. Immediately, ropes descended like mechanical snakes, but Shaggy and Scooby managed to dodge by millimeters, their screams of terror echoing through the mirrors. The plan worked. Almost. A rope that Fred hadn't anticipated descended directly toward Velma. She dove to the side, but her foot got caught in a second trap, a mechanical claw that emerged from the floor. "Velma!" shouted Fred, running toward her. "No!" she shouted back. "Save the people in the room. I'll find a way out." Daphne, still hanging from the rope, shouted, "The secret entrance opened. I can see 2 more people inside." Fred hesitated for a crucial second. Save Velma or rescue the captives? It was exactly the kind of choice Jigsaw wanted to force him to make. "Shaggy, Scooby," Fred made a quick decision. "You're going to help Velma. Daphne and I are going to the room." "But Fred," protested Velma, trying to free herself from the mechanical claw, "it might be another trap." That's when they all heard something that froze their hearts. Jigsaw's sinister laughter, coming not from the speakers, but from somewhere physically close inside the House of Mirrors. "He's here," whispered Daphne. "Jigsaw is here with us." And that's when they realized they might never have been hunting a remote villain controlling the park from a distance. Maybe, all along, he had been right there, watching every move, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal his identity. The sound of footsteps echoed through the mirrored corridors, approaching inexorably. The sound of footsteps multiplied through the mirrors, creating a confusing echo that made it impossible to determine where Jigsaw was approaching from. Fred and Daphne approached the secret entrance to the room, while Shaggy and Scooby worked frantically to free Velma from the mechanical claw. Use the Scooby snack as a lever. The claw has a spring mechanism. If you press both sides simultaneously, shouted Shaggy, while Scooby tried to force the metal teeth holding Velma's ankle. "It didn't work," moaned Scooby. "The claw is real strong." But 3 people tied up, the young couple they had seen through the mirrors, and a third person. The park janitor, Mr. Milton Wickles, who had supposedly been fired 3 years ago. Velma, even trapped, continued analyzing the situation, now clearly coming from the main corridor of the House of Mirrors. "You found my previous guinea pigs, but you still haven't discovered who I am, have you?" Click. Her leg was freed. Meanwhile, Fred and Daphne entered the secret room and found not 2. Wickles, that old fool? He pointed to the real Wickles tied in the chair. The voice became bitter, until greedy executives decided that small family parks were obsolete. "He was just my first victim when I came back home. You were a mechanical engineer. You designed new rides for the family park." Tommy removed the mask, revealing a man in his 30s with cold, calculating eyes. They destroy people's lives and then wonder why they created monsters. But when investors took over, you were the first to be laid off. Wickles. He forced us to watch these horrible videos. Scenes from other parks that he sabotaged. Exclaimed Daphne, beginning to untie the ropes. "Why does he have to be someone with complex psychological problems? Are you all right?" Mr. Running through corridors that were constantly transforming. Scooby and Shaggy were dragged by a hidden conveyor belt in the floor. What Fred had taken for a reflection was actually a camouflage door. Let's see who really has courage when they're alone. But we learned that overcoming problems is better than seeking revenge for them. Time was running out, indicating that Tommy had activated some kind of final mechanism. Whatever it was, They had only minutes to stop him before the House of Mirrors became a permanent death trap. And Tommy Wickles had achieved exactly what he wanted: separate them for a final confrontation where each would have to face their deepest fears alone. Privileged young people who play detective, who always managed to solve everything easily, who never faced real consequences. The man wore a grotesque white mask with hypnotic spirals painted on it, and dark clothes that made him blend with the shadows. The older man nodded weakly. Worse still, steam jets began shooting from the floor, obscuring vision. "But you still haven't passed the final test," Fred frowned. "Other parks?" "5 amusement parks closed in the region in the last 2 years," whispered Wickles. "They all had mysterious accidents just before closing. Jigsaw was behind it all." The sinister laughter echoed again, shouted Velma, limping into the room with Shaggy and Scooby. "You were fired when the park closed, and you're getting revenge." "Very good, Freddy." A hooded figure emerged from the mirrors. "Literally. You're Milton Wickles." The masked man laughed. "Then who are you?" asked Fred. "Someone who knows every inch of this place. Someone who grew up here, who loved every ride, every game, every child's laughter. Daphne." Daphne stepped forward courageously. "You're Tommy Wickles, Mr. Wickles' son. You grew up in this park." The man stopped laughing. "I read about you in the old newspapers," continued Daphne. "Very clever, rich girl." Shaggy, trembling behind Scooby, whispered, "Why can't he just be a normal ghost?" Tommy continued, "Every park I closed was owned by the same corporation that destroyed Wonderland. I consider it poetic justice." "But why call us here?" asked Velma. "Why the mind games? Because you represent everything I hate," Tommy shouted, losing his composure. Fred stepped forward. "You're wrong, Tommy. We've all faced our fears and failures." What a touching speech. Tommy pulled out a remote control. He pressed the button and the entire House of Mirrors began to shake. The mirrors started rotating like a giant kaleidoscope, creating amazing, constant movement. "Now you're going to experience what it's like to be truly lost," shouted Tommy, disappearing among the rotating mirrors. "Gang!" shouted Fred over the mechanical noise. "Stay together. Follow the sound of my voice." But the steam and moving mirrors made it impossible to keep the group together. Daphne found herself separated from the others. "Now it's every person for themselves," echoed Tommy's voice through the speakers. That's when Velma realized something crucial. The mirrors, they're following a mathematical pattern. If we can predict the sequence... But her explanation was interrupted by a scream from Daphne somewhere in the maze. The sound of heavy machinery echoed through the structure. Velma managed to calculate the pattern of the rotating mirrors and navigated through the moving corridors until she found the central control panel of the House of Mirrors. Her hands flew over the buttons, trying to deactivate the system before someone got seriously hurt. "The pattern is based on the Fibonacci sequence," she murmured to herself. "If I reverse the polarity of the motors... Meanwhile, Daphne had found a secret passage that led directly to Tommy's improvised office, where he monitored the entire park through dozens of monitors. Without hesitation, she hid behind a file cabinet and waited for the right moment. On the other side of the maze, Fred had managed to reach Shaggy and Scooby, who were trapped in the section where the floor had tilted, creating a kind of slide that kept them sliding in circles. "Gang!" Fred shouted. "I'm going to throw a rope. Grab on. Why does it always have to involve heights?" moaned Shaggy, but grabbed the rope along with Scooby. Tommy watched everything through the monitors, his expression becoming increasingly frustrated. This shouldn't be happening. They should be paralyzed by fear by now. That's when Daphne emerged from the shadows behind him. "The only person paralyzed by fear here is you, Tommy," she said calmly. "You're so terrified of facing your own failures that you decided to blame everyone else." Tommy turned quickly, but Daphne had already pulled the main cable that powered all the House of Mirrors systems. The lights went out, the mirrors stopped rotating, and the steam began to dissipate. "You!" Tommy advanced toward her, but tripped over his own cables in the dark. Minutes later, when the emergency lighting came on, Fred, Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby found Daphne tying up Tommy Wickles with his own control cables. "Daphne!" exclaimed Fred. "How did you manage to find him?" "Simple," she smiled. "While you were focused on the physical maze, I paid attention to the psychological maze. Tommy wanted total control, so he had to be in a location where he could see everything. There was only one place in the park that offered that perspective: the old control room of the main roller coaster." Velma approached Tommy, who was clearly defeated. "There's one thing I don't understand. How did you manage to know so much about our personalities?" Tommy laughed bitterly. "You're famous, aren't you? There are articles about you in newspapers, interviews. I studied every case you solved. I knew your weaknesses better than you knew them yourselves." "But you were wrong about one thing," said Fred firmly. "Our supposed weaknesses are actually our strengths. I trust my plans because I trust my team. Velma solves mysteries because she cares about the truth. Daphne isn't just a rich girl, she's brave and smart. And Shaggy and Scooby may be scared, but they're the most loyal friends anyone could have." "Exactly," agreed Scooby, approaching Tommy. "Why can't you be rappy without hurting people?" Tommy looked at the talking dog, and, for the first time, his hardened expression softened slightly. I just wanted things to go back to the way they were before. When this place was magical, when families came here to be happy, ... Mr. Wickles, who had been freed along with the other captives, approached his son. "Tommy, I miss those times too. But creating suffering won't bring back our happiness. Dad." Tommy lowered his head. "I messed everything up, didn't I?" "It's never too late to start over," said Mr. Wickles gently. "Maybe we can find a way to reopen the park. The right way this time." While waiting for the police to arrive, Shaggy explored one of the abandoned food stands and found a can of Scooby snacks that was still within its expiration date. "Look, Scooby. At least one good thing came out of this adventure. Scooby snacks," exclaimed Scooby happily, and the two began devouring the cookies. Daphne approached Fred. "You know, it was nice to hear you say, 'I'm not just a rich girl.'" Fred smiled. "Daphne, you saved us today. Without your courage and intelligence, we'd probably still be trapped in that maze." Velma, adjusting her glasses, observed, "The most interesting thing is that Tommy really created a sophisticated psychological experiment. If he channeled that intelligence into something constructive, maybe he can," said Mr. Wickles hopefully. "After he serves his sentence, maybe we can work together to transform this place into something positive again." As the sun set over Wonderland Park, the lights from the police cars illuminated the old structures, but there was a sense of hope in the air. Tommy was taken away, not as the villain Jigsaw, but as a troubled man who could finally find help. "Well, gang," said Fred, as they walked back to the van. "Another mystery solved." "Yeah," agreed Shaggy. "But next time someone invites us to an amusement park, I'm going to suggest a water park. What could go wrong with water slides and pools?" Velma, Daphne, and Fred exchanged worried looks. "Shaggy," said Velma slowly, "you just gave us an idea for our next adventure." "I don't want to know," shouted Shaggy, running to the van. "Scooby, help me here." "Scooby-dooby-doo," laughed Scooby, running after his friend. And so, as the mystery machine disappeared down the dusty road, Wonderland Park was left behind. No longer a place of nightmares, but perhaps, one day, a place where dreams could come to life again.